Okay, I'm Mary Carson Stiff, and with Wetlands Watch is also Madison Teeter, who's been helping with the work group, and we're here excited to share some things that we've been working on. This is kind of seems like a lot of administrative stuff in this meeting, less exciting presentation stuff, but just updates that we need to cover. There was going to be a presentation lessons learned from the city of Chesapeake, but they got swamped with vaccine rollout. And so they're going to present at the next work group meeting. So that's kind of why we don't have a big presentation today. George just posted an awesome article that was just released from the Virginia Mercury about the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act. And so if you haven't had a chance to read that, it came out, I think, this morning. Definitely helpful in light of our conversation that we'll be having about the draft letter on the proposed draft regulations. Work group introductions, we did that. Zoom manners, we don't even need to do that. Everybody's such a pro now. Our future dates in 2020. So you can see here, May 26th is next, July, then September. And I have asterisks next to the July and September. We're going to talk about getting together in person if people are comfortable with that, maybe a smaller group. And Wetlands Watch is definitely going to get together and do an in-person trial run of our new equipment on May 26th. So we'll be in the facility, hopefully, if we can get that date secured with the conference people in Newport News. So anyway, we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but here are just the upcoming dates. All of the CECs that we have had for the past several meetings have been submitted. And they should be automatically populating in your ASFPM, like CEC part of your login. And if they're not, let me know, but they should be current. Mine are showing up. And I know we have issues with Zoom and polling and all that jazz, but we're, I'm following the polling very carefully. And if I see that people are still on and participating, then I note that in my submittal. But you really have to participate in the polling because that's the only way we're able to get credits for these CECs electronically. So that being said, I'm going to launch the first poll. I know you answered this in your registration about CECs, but we've had issues with our polling, like not showing the right way on an Excel spreadsheet, which means I have to go through and manually change everything. And it's just been a nightmare. So we're going to try it this way and see if this fix the problem. And by poll upcoming dates, do I mean 2021? Yes, I do. Whoops. Look at that. 2020. I'm living in the past. Thank you, Paul. Definitely 2021. Thank goodness we're out of 2020. Okay, so people should still be voting, wanting CEC credits. How many people are we in this meeting? 29. I'm going to leave this poll up. Ken, I know that you just joined, so there's a poll question. Oh, and that might be Dannon. So just make sure somebody fills out the poll. And Dannon, can you just, let me just make a note that there are two of y'all getting the polls.
Yep.
If there are two people or more than one people in your conference room, like Picosin is doing, please send me a chat or note that in the chat, and I'll make sure that both names are submitted. Dannon and Ken both receiving CECs. The joys of this stuff. Okay, so we've been successful in getting 1.5 CECs, and I'm going to keep trying to get us to have an hour and a half of content, and then just leave the last 30 minutes for discussion. And that's been working well because we have been doing the polling and all that jazz. So hopefully this will be helpful for y'all in getting continuing education credits. This is my regular plug for VFMA, the Virginia Floodplain Management Association. We encourage everybody to apply and be a member of VFMA. VFMA's president, Kristen Owen from Henrico County, is on the call today. And we're going to be having, we did not have the kind of Virginia Water Conference. We didn't participate in that online event, which is always held in Richmond this year, because we are trying to do something different. Not that that will continue forever in the future, but just for this particular year, we're going to have our own little conference. And we haven't settled on a date, right, Kristen?
Right. We're thinking right now late summer. And then obviously trying to avoid some of the other conferences that are sometimes in late summer, like APA. I did get a request recently to just like replace our fall workshops with the conference and then just do like the fall workshops in the spring or something. So something we can talk about. We haven't really decided on that, but I got some feedback about all of the other conferences and vacations and things happening in late summer, early fall, and they would rather just like replace the fall workshops with the conference and then shift them around. So,
okay.
So we'll see, but we're working on it. We haven't set a real date yet though.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah. So if you're wondering what happened with the Virginia Water Conference, that is what happened. We're just trying to figure it out in COVID. Okay.
Oh, Mary Carson, can I add the scholarship thing too? Real quick.
Yes.
So one of the things that VFMA is going to do this year is we are going to sponsor up to 10 VFMA members to attend the ASFPM National Conference, which is in May. It's going to be virtual. It was supposed to be in Raleigh. So we had planned to have kind of a big push of Virginia participants since it was going to be so close. But now that it's virtual, that kind of gives us an opportunity to send even more people because there's not the associated travel costs. So if you're a VFMA member and you have never gone to the ASFPM conference or you're interested, maybe you have gone before, just keep that in mind. We've been working on coming up with like the application for that. And so there are questions that are going to be on it, like how long have you been a member and things like that, but none of that really matters. It's just to give us an idea. Like that's not going to determine if you get the scholarship or not. It's just to give us an idea of who is applying and how you participated in VFMA. But yeah, so we'll send that out to members in the near future, and then probably in like 2 weeks, because we have a board meeting next week to talk about it and finalize everything. So keep an eye on that. And then yeah, we would basically pay for your whole registration fee for the ASFPM conference. And then you can join that and you would just provide us with like an update on what you learned and everything. So keep that in mind because it's like $350 to $400 to go to that conference.
Great. Thanks, Kristen. Yeah. And if you haven't attended this conference, it's just so wonderful.
It is.
They do such a nice job getting really interesting speakers, and even the electronic version, when they migrated it online last year, was really helpful and interesting. And I think a pretty big success. So please do take VFMA up on this opportunity. We're trying to encourage more of a Virginia presence at these events, and especially with it being so close, even though of course it's in the air, but nevertheless. Okay, got more people coming in. If you've just joined, so I just let a couple people in. I'm going to keep this poll up. So if you're CFM and you want CECs, I know you just did something on the registration page, but please do fill out this poll again. We're just having issues with how the polls are reported on our Zoom account. So fill out the poll. Tell us you want CECs. Okay, thank you, Kristen. ISO Virginia's representative, just in case people aren't aware, is Emily Schmidt. That doesn't mean that there aren't other ISO people working with your communities. In fact, I know that there are quite a lot, but Emily's our main gal. Doug Reedy is retired and Emily's on our call. So hi, Emily, anything you want to add?
Hi, everyone. I've had some great conversations with some of you, and I'm working on getting those last few ordinances reviewed with Michelle. She's been helping me, and I'll be reaching out to the rest of you to kind of get those dates set for this year. But my whole kind of approach is, rather than giving you the date and then waiting until it comes to communicate, to kind of have a either bi-weekly or weekly call to kind of work through all of your pieces leading up to the meeting, so that we have it kind of spaced out over the calendar, because I know a lot of my actual meeting dates will be later in the year because of the ordinance revision requirements. So I'm available, and we'll be working with you kind of to get those documents submitted on a rolling basis so that we have them by the time we get to our actual meeting. So hopefully that will really cut down on the lag time after the meeting of getting the file wrapped up and completed.
So I thank you, Emily. I wonder if, hold on one second. Let's move to ordinance conversation. So can folks share who has updated their ordinance most recently to reflect this new freeboard requirement and how they've done that? Henrico is getting ready to send their ordinance to the attorneys. And so I know that Kristen would appreciate it if there could be a little bit of discussion about the ordinance modifications specifically related to this Class A prerequisite.
Yeah, so I guess to provide a little bit of background, my main question is, do we have an actual definition of machinery and equipment? Because I haven't been able to find a real definition. I see Emily smiling, so I feel like you've gotten this question a lot. That's my main question, because I know like some people are still going to rely on the building code, and some things, Tom, I thought you were going to revise your ordinance. But the main question I think I'm going to get asked is, what is machinery and equipment?
I can send you guys the frequently asked questions and responses. We did 2 sets of those. So if you got one in the summer, there was one that was issued in the fall. But that has been a repeatedly asked and discussed point of contention, because we know that there are some things that you can't put elevated, like a water gauge or something that's in the ground, so there's not a clean fits all definition. And I think it's mostly looking at what you're able to enforce, so that you guys, if you want to make a clean definition for it and put it in your ordinance as one of your definition line items, that when you're talking about machinery and equipment, it's talking about things like HVAC and water heater and duct work and all that, so that you have a clear thing for enforcement. That's great. We're not trying to make it hard. We're just trying to make it so that if there is a flood, the machinery and equipment that needs to be safe is at safe elevations. And I think the main point of that being included in this update was that they were seeing a lot more of the policy claims pertaining to damaged machinery and equipment, because they weren't at the freeboard levels. So that was the whole push. And I know it's not a super clear answer, but I can send that frequently asked questions and answers guide again if you guys don't have it.
It's okay. I've read them. They don't have anything in it about this, so you don't need to share it. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, it sounds like you all are more just worried about like ductwork and HVACs and things like that. And so if we want to I don't necessarily feel like we need to come up with a definition, but I might be told that we have to come up with a definition. So has anybody else like defined this at all or thought about defining it? And then Emily, I guess if we do define something, can we send it to you to get like approval on this? Because I don't want us to adopt something and then ISO to question it later.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely do courtesy reviews. I'm getting help with mine because ordinance language is not my background strong suit. um, but yes, feel free to send it to me and I will get it looked at. And I think the main thing is that when we're looking at those ECs, when we're looking at the C2E elevation, are they, is what they're marking for those elevations, are those at the freeboard levels? Like that's what we're able to check for enforcement. So the type of machinery and equipment that would get logged in on that elevation certificate point, that's what we're looking at.
Okay, yeah, and that's a good point. I'm just gonna look at the instructions because I don't remember if the elevation certificate like calls it out more on what it is. I'll look at that and see and share it in the chat if it does.
Okay.
While I patiently wait for Christy to copy hers. Thank you. Oh yeah, Tom, I looked at the building code too, and I couldn't find a definition in the building code for any of this either. Like there's the section related to the exception language related to this. That was the whole fight with CRS. So I was kind of thinking like, well, if we use that language, that might work. But I kind of like James City County's definition. Okay, thanks. Well, I'll look at the elevation certificate, and then if we come up with something, I'll share it with the group and send it to you, Emily.
I will say that for the class 8 prerequisite, it's elevated, not flood proofed. Residential buildings needs to be elevated. The non-residential buildings can still be flood proofed to get the freeboard credit in 430, but the prerequisite for residential structures, the mechanical equipment needs to be elevated.
I think we do that. This is Christy with James City. I mean, we only allow flood proofing for commercial, so it would be interpreted that way. Next time, obviously, if we update ordinances, we can clarify that. But Tom Coghill can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we've ever approved anything flood proofed in a residential. It always has to be elevated.
Which is fine. And at this point, when you have your next verification cycle visit, a letter or a memo to the specialist explaining this is how we interpret and enforce this language. Yes, it says flood proofed, but that's applicable only for our non-residential buildings per this part of our ordinance. And all of our residential gets the elevated.
Okay, I'll make sure I get something to file so we can have that.
File so that nobody down the line, like you can have that conversation verbally during the visit, but then unless the specialist remembers to put all that in the notes, the reviewer might not know that that's how it's being enforced. So I prefer having those kinds of memos just for clarity down the line for other readers of the file.
Yep, that's a good point.
So I just copied like the long section from the elevation certificate instructions, and it mentions, like it says, the following machinery and equipment items: elevators, their associated equipment, furnaces, hot water heaters, heat pumps, and air conditioners. And then later on, it says also including ductwork. So
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we go with that and then expand if we want to, or maybe just say could include these things, not necessarily limited to give us some flexibility. But if CRS is looking mainly at because of the elevation certificate, then I feel like that should be acceptable.
That's pretty much the method that we have for checking enforcement of the freeboard of the, both freeboard for the elevation and then freeboard for the mechanical equipment is the elevation certificate. That's really the only way we'll be able to see if you guys are enforcing your ordinance of those elevations.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
And Matt posted for City of Norfolk. They are allowing a primary component versus a secondary component.
So in that, in the FEMA book that they provide, protecting building utility systems from flood damage, it breaks it down by primary and secondary components.
Mhm.
And we find that's extremely helpful, especially dealing with like contractors. And so we kind of point them to that book and use that to
Unmute
kind
your
of,
Yeah, and going back to a FEMA, is a great way to.
hold on a second.
Go ahead, Emily.
Oh, I was just going to say that referring back to a FEMA publication is an excellent way of saying, okay, well, this is what we're going with because this is what FEMA has required. So of course it should meet all of the requirements.
Yeah. So would it be helpful to kind of include in a follow-up email or on the CRS website? Would it be helpful to include like some of the language from the different communities just as reference? Like, ordinance language, would that be helpful? Or Kristen, do you think that you're just
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be helpful. And I'm gonna pull, like I put the link to that book that Matt was talking about in the chat, if anybody wanted to look at it. It like looks way more detailed. So I don't know that I would use it for a definition, but I think I might just pull together a definition. I'm actually meeting with our attorney tomorrow. And so I'll pull together something based on like the elevation certificate and see, and then have some like flexible language. So we are not totally limited to that in case something else comes up. But yeah, I think it'd be helpful if anybody shared anything to have that on the website. And then if I come up with anything else, I'll share it with you.
Yeah. And maybe once whatever you are going to use and whatever the attorneys sign off on and whatever Emily signs off on, then we can put that on the website.
Yeah, I'm going to the attorney first, then I'll be going to FEMA and Emily to be like, all right, is this good before we start public hearings? Because I don't want to redo all of this.
Okay. Other service equipment. Yeah, Matt just put the definition. Okay. All right. Well, that's helpful. Thanks, y'all. All right, now let me get backwards.
Sorry, one more thing I want to add about the residential stuff. I haven't seen this issue too much in the Virginia ordinance language, but I also work for the state of Georgia. So, and they've had more issues with it. Just make sure that if you have mobile homes in a separate section, that those are residential and they do need to be up to that freeboard level as well. Nope, I forgot the other piece that I was gonna throw in there. So just making sure that those manufactured homes are in there. Oh, and the other piece was if you do separate out your freeboard requirements per flood zone, just make sure that any of those zones that have elevations are included. So we've had some issues with AO zones because those are flood depth instead of elevation. And so the language gets a little bit tricky. So just make sure that if you do split out in your ordinance based on flood zone, you take a look at those as well. Thanks.
Great. Okay, let's see. Okay, DCR Floodplain Staff. So there should be 2 new staff people that have joined us on the call today. And that's Brandy, oh my gosh, my apologies, not Bandy, Buford and Michael Barber. Angela noted that there would be no update from DCR staff in terms of like what's going on, how y'all are doing and all that stuff in this meeting, but at the next meeting, hopefully. But I just thought it would be a good opportunity for Brandy and Michael to introduce themselves and maybe just let us know where you're from and what your position is at DCR.
Hi, good morning, Mary. Unfortunately, it's actually just me today. Michael is sitting in on a Hopewell CCO meeting right now, so he was not able to attend this morning. But yes, I am a new floodplain program planner here at DCR. I came from Tucson, Arizona, where I worked for Pima County Regional Flood Control District. I was a permit coordinator and a hydrologist and a CFM there for 3 years. So I'm really excited to get out to the coast and learn about coastal flooding because this is all new for me. But I'm really excited. I'm really enjoying what I'm learning thus far. And yes, Angela said we don't actually have any updates today. We will have one down the road, just not today.
Great. Well, thanks, Brandy. And you're working statewide, right? Not just specifically in the coast. I don't know if this is too much information detailed or whatever, but are they kind of splitting up where y'all are working, or is it just kind of?
We have kind of split up somewhat, but it still is statewide. So I have locations that are coastal. I have locations in the, Southwest and Northwest and so forth. So yeah, we did delegate locations, but we are a little bit everywhere. So
Great. Well, welcome. We're so glad to have your participation, and we look forward to hearing more about what y'all are up to and meeting you in person one day, hopefully. Okay. Future work group meetings. So I guess this will be the last kind of like housekeeping thing that we do, and then we'll go into risk rating 2.0, just knowing that there are those folks that have joined us from North Carolina. So we'll do that next. Just kind of wondering how people are feeling and what people are comfortable with. I don't know if everyone's getting vaccinated. And if you live in Hampton Roads, let us tell you where you can get vaccinated today. The Portsmouth Sportsplex, if you don't know this, has a big vaccination center, and they are letting anyone who wants to receive a shot get a shot. And they're making an announcement tomorrow that the facility is open to everybody, according to the guy that I spoke with there last week. So if you want to be vaccinated and you have availability, the Portsmouth Sportsplex, it's kind of near-ish to downtown Portsmouth, is a really good option. I know that Norfolk is opening a big center, and I don't know if they'll go kind of according to 1A, 1B, whatever format, but then not sure about that. But that is something that I would be I'm happy to share with everyone if you didn't know about that. So
they are all wonderful. I was there yesterday morning. It's a very efficient process. They hire people from Chick-fil-A to work there or something. It's amazing. They're so nice. So highly recommend.
They are so nice. You're so right. Okay. So I'm sorry, I'm distracted. I just got a text message about risk rating 2.0. So Meg from the city of Portsmouth just said they're also going to start having shot availability on Saturdays. This is just huge. Portsmouth, y'all are crushing it, and we're just so grateful. It's your world. We're just living in it. That's how I feel about it. So literally our coworker drove down from Williamsburg and got her shot. So really exciting. Okay. Sorry, I just got really distracted. So the future work group meetings, if people are comfortable to meet in person this summer, I would love to meet in person, just because I know that people are getting vaccinated. We can still wear masks and all that. But as I mentioned previously, Wetlands Watch is going to try out all of our new equipment to make the presentations in person kind of more adaptable to the people meeting virtually. Making sure audio will be working in the middle of the room and the back of the room so everybody can hear everybody. And we're probably going to be doing that in the May meeting. But if people are comfortable, I can, just say that maybe we can start meeting some of us. So if anybody has any thoughts, want to contribute to this conversation, that would be great. Tom has already said that the county has travel policies, which is a good point. Didn't even think about that being a potential issue. So if you want to contribute to the discussion, feel free to do in the chat, or you can come off mute.
Mary Carson, this is Meg. You know, I'm personally comfortable and I've had my second shot. But you know, my availability will depend on, you know, what our administration allows us to do in terms of meeting in person, you know, so that'll just be a pending. We're getting a new city manager in a couple weeks and, you know, policies could change. So, you know, summer may be still too soon for stuff like that, but you know, at some point, you know, I'm like I said, I'm personally comfortable, but you know, our policy will depend on what our administration allows us to do.
Okay, Kristen coming in. Okay, so it sounds like this is a locality by locality decision, and I wonder if that will just be the case for everybody. Okay, well, maybe we'll just go in person and see how it works, at least for the May meeting, and we'll just kind of play this by ear. Okay, so let's talk about risk rating 2.0 and this is hilarious. Skip, my boss, was just texting me saying that the announcement of risk rating 2.0 being pushed off was made this morning. We've been waiting for notification from FEMA headquarters, actually getting information about this, you know, delay, but it was a false alarm, apparently. So they haven't actually posted something. Okay, so what a mess. So sorry. All right, so I want to talk about risk rating 2.0 because we have been following this very, very carefully. And I thought this morning I would have information about a formal pushback, but we don't have notification of that yet. And we had a false alarm that we did, but that was just Skip reading the website wrong. So the website that will apparently have an announcement this morning or sometime today, I've just posted in the chat. So this is where there will be some notification of a change. If you look at the website, it says in like red lettering that the implementation has been deferred to April 1st, 2021. That's what Skip was reacting to. And that has always been the case, or at least it has been for about a year. So it was pushed back first a year ago. And this is still, you know, the information that we knew as of 2 days ago, that they were going to make the April 1st rates available, or the rates available on April 1st, and then with actual implementation of October 1st. So let's just kind of take a step back and talk about risk rating 2.0. We talked about it very briefly in our last CRS Workgroup meeting, but I know there's a lot of interest in this. And as I said, we've been watching it very carefully. So here's the background for those that might not know. The risk rating 2.0 is going to go from a zone-based rate, which is the world that we live in now. Obviously, we all know about our flood zones and how it correlates to rates, to an individual property-based rate. So this kind of, the way to think about it is that the base flood elevation is now just the beginning of risk measurement, and there will be other factors included. And this kind of leads us to wonder, what is the role of zones going to be in the future if, you know, there's an abandonment of a lot of the components of zones that make them, you know, that relate them to risk and to the price of risk. So something that we really don't have an answer to, but something to be thinking of. We think that there's going to be more of a reliance on the other risk products other than just the maps. So all of those regulatory products that you still receive as part of your package, there might be more reliance on those in the future. They're getting rid of preferred risk policies, which is a shock for those of us that have preferred risk policies, myself included. And the lack of preferred risk policies is interesting and opens questions related to the CRS program and how that will work. And you know, all I can say is that what we've heard is that the CRS program will undergo a big change, but it will not be immediate. It will be a while off, and will be after Risk Rating 2.0 rolls out and has been effective for a while. But the idea is that the community might be open entirely to CRS benefits. So there's a good chance that all policyholders in the community could be receiving the CRS discount, which is great news for CRS communities. It means that the hard work that you've been putting in will be even more valuable, and also good news for some of the barriers to communities joining the CRS. If it makes sense for a community to be in the CRS program, those barriers related to equity and, you know, in some communities, wealthier people living along the coastline reaping the benefit of tax dollars being spent to advance a program that benefits wealthier people over others. And so that, of course, is something that a lot of communities have dealt with. But lucky for us, floodplain is everywhere. And so it affects people of wealth and not of wealth. And so not true in every community, but certainly more likely in our region. So nevertheless, something to look out for on how the preferred risk policies will change. So the elevation certificates are not going to be required, but they can be used to submit in rate generation. So this is going to be a really big change, and especially in marrying the Risk Rating 2.0 with the CRS program. CRS program loves elevation certificates, and this lack of requirement in the future, I think, is going to be a challenge for the CRS program to be modified. So again, we don't really have a lot of clarity on exactly how elevation certificates will be used in the future and how they'll be required. Flood mitigation is still supposed to be factored into rates. So all of the important work that communities are doing to mitigate against flood risk, and the important work policyholders, property owners are doing, will still benefit those policyholder rates. Replacement cost is now a factor in setting rates, and this is a really important part of Risk Rating 2.0. It gets at the equity piece. And so allowing for replacement costs to be factored in will hopefully bridge the gap, and it will mean that property owners that might have 1,000 square feet home in a high risk flood zone, you know, they could be paying $6,000 of flood insurance a year, and their property value and replacement costs is significantly out of equal distribution or out of equity. So that is really good news for a lot of people who are struggling to pay the exorbitant flood insurance premiums. So what are they using instead of, or in addition to the base flood elevation that they're getting from mapping, not from actual elevation certificates in every case, which I guess is still the case, right? So a lot of the zones at least are done without actual elevation certificates for every property, but the rates will include finished floor, distance from flooding source, so distance from a creek or a river or the ocean. Localized drainage. This was reported over the summer. I don't know how they're going to include this, but nevertheless, they've said that they will. And then maximum, and then a couple other things will be factored in. So what was reported over the summer, late summer, in a presentation, actually, no, excuse me, this was in the fall, was that premiums would be maxed out at $12,000. I just don't think this is accurate. I mean, it might be, but given some of the other information that we've heard recently, I question this statistic. And again, it's a little bit old. And so some of the information that we've been receiving from webinars and stuff has been a little bit dated and kind of updated. So take that with a grain of salt, but it is something that I heard from an official FEMA webinar. I'm just gonna stop talking for a second because I did just get an email from our friends at FEMA. So hold on one second. Okay, so I've been given approval to share this notice in our meeting. Okay, so there will be a FEMA and DHS release tomorrow. This individual thought it was going to be today, but he's sharing a clip of the release that mentions timing. Okay, so FEMA is conscious of the far-reaching economic impacts of COVID-19 has had on the nation and existing policyholders, and is taking a phased approach to rolling out the new rates. In phase 1, new policies beginning October 1st, 2021, will be subject to the risk rating 2.0 rating methodology. Also beginning October 1, existing policyholders eligible for renewal will be given the option to take advantage of immediate decreases in their premiums. Okay, in phase 2, all policies renewing on or after April 1st, 2022 will be subject to the risk rating methodology. FEMA continues to work with Congress, its industry partners at state, local, and tribal and territorial agencies to ensure clear understanding of these changes. Okay, so phase 1. New policies. Okay, so that's for new policies beginning October 1st will be subject to risk rating 2.0. And then on October 1st, if you're going to have a decrease in your premium, then you'll be able to take advantage of that decrease. So all the people who aren't going to be advantaged and are going to be disadvantaged, the policies renewing on or after April 1st will be subject to the risk rating methodology. Okay, interesting. I definitely thought it was going to just be pushed back whole hog, and it is not. So that's it's good news for what George has said. Kind of separation of floodplain management from flood insurance policies is good, but there is the added element of this is going to be confusing for policyholders and residents, and it will be confusing for CRS communities as the CRS changes with risk rating 2.0. And then, of course, the added element of pretty sure there are going to be a lot of coastal policyholders that are probably not going to have a positive feeling about the risk rating 2.0 rating methodology. So any questions about FEMA's kind of report or release that I guess will come out tomorrow before I continue? No? Okay. Sorry, that was so lackluster. I was getting text messages and emails at the same time, which was helpful. Okay, so a little bit more about what the policy, the impact of the rates nationally. So this is again a national statistic, and we're going to pull up Virginia's statistics on the next slide. So 23% of policies nationwide will see lower rates with an average of about $1,000 lower a year. 73% of policies will see no or very small change. And that change is about $240 of difference for an annual rate. And then 4% of the nation's policies will have an unknown but a high impact. And just to remind everybody, all of these risk rating 2.0 changes are still governed by the increased caps for 18% for primary residences and 25% for investment properties and businesses. So those are still in place. And how this will work in terms of, how long the increases will continue. FEMA said that some policies will see this max of 18 or 25% for 10 years before the rates are risk actual. So that could end up being about 5 times a current flood insurance premium today. So, for us in coastal Virginia, this unknown factor of distance from the water body is probably going to be what we're going to hear the most about and probably be thinking the most about. I'm calling it a coastal surcharge. That's not what FEMA's calling it at all, but I think that that's the way that I'll probably be communicating it to people. This is the breakdown. Thanks, Kristen, for sharing that link for the state fact sheets and some. Let's see if there's another. Kristen, can you repost it or someone repost it? North Carolina's fact sheet. Oh yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I posted theirs too. I'll go back up in the chat and find it and send it again.
I have it open right now. I can go ahead and just post it.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
I saw it open from before.
So yeah, this is kind of the bulk of the information, though. A lot of it is otherwise review. So 45% of our Virginia communities are going to see a decrease, which is great. 48% will see that kind of small increase. So interesting that they did a different interval. Oh, okay. So they added a $0 to $10 per month as opposed to the $0 to $20 per month that the previous slide showed. So 48% will see about $120 a year, and then 5% seeing about a 240% or $240 per year. 2% will see a greater increase. So we have 2% of that large unknown. So interesting.
It would be really helpful to have a better understanding of the breakdown, like by community or just like around the state. Because on the fact sheet, they provide the map, which is right above this graphic. That kind of was misleading because it was like, oh, is that where these increases are going to be? But it's not. It's just the number of policies in the state. So it would be helpful to get an idea of like, where are these decreases happening? Are those just, in certain areas? Are they like spread equally? Are some communities going to be having higher increases than others? Like that would be really interesting to see, because I suspect we're all going to get a million phone calls as soon as people get these letters. I know I've already been getting calls nonstop for the last few weeks of just people getting their regular insurance letters, not even tied to 2.0 yet. So
yeah. So in light of that, I'm just going to launch this poll about whether or not residents have been contacting you. So fill out the poll.
that was not planned.
No, definitely wasn't. That's part of my let's get these CECs plan.
On my question, I say this is Whitney, and my question is, how much of the people that are seeing increases are seeing increases because their coverage is increasing to replacement cost, and they may have had a lower amount of coverage either because they were forced to or by choice, and now that they're getting kicked over to replacement cost, it's going up, but it's just because their coverage is getting better.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point, Whitney, because a lot of the people I've talked to lately have either decreased their coverage amounts and or increased their deductible to the highest amount to lower their rates. And like
Right.
a lot of people I've talked to have reduced it to whatever is left on their mortgage instead of like full coverage or replacement value. So that'll be really interesting to
Well,
have that
like,
breakdown.
yeah, I have a preferred risk policy right now, and I have a very low amount of coverage on it because for being in coastal Virginia, I have an extremely high ground elevation and I'm on a crawl space. So if I had more, if I had water in my house, there'd have to be a really, really, really big storm that basically in Hampton Roads is completely underwater before I needed more than a small amount of coverage to cover some sort of flood on my house. So like I'm guessing I'm going to be one of those policies that's getting bumped because they're bumping me to replacement cost.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and we don't have any information from FEMA on that very issue. Nothing from them. All right, well, this is the rollout, and clearly we're having a little bit of a change here. So I guess if I said, I'll post this tomorrow and the information will be public. So I'll make sure that the information that was just read out, the phase 1 and phase 2, I'll make sure this is modified to reflect what will be told. And just wanted to note, if people weren't aware, there was a lot of pushback, and that was being led by Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer from New York. And there's a really good New York Times article from March 18th that Christopher Flavell, who has attended our work group meetings in the past, and who wrote the article about NFIP compliance. And anyway, it's a great article. And this, of course, was interesting because the Senate's influence over FEMA and NFIP is pretty significant. Okay. All right, so we did our poll. So if you haven't filled out the poll, please fill it out. Any discussion around risk rating 2.0? I feel like that was so haphazard and I was so distracted because of all of the interruptions, but I hope that it was still worthwhile information. Any questions? Okay. I'm going to post the link to the New York Times. Oh yeah, Ashley. Good question. I know Ashley is our first floor elevation guru. So how will first floor elevations be determined? Basically mapping. This whole risk rating 2.0 is been 5 years in the making, and so they've been using the newest modeling tools to determine first floor elevations, and I assume that means LiDAR that's been flown from whomever to estimate first floor elevations. And I think that that's kind of the extent of it. Again, with the rates being announced and rolled out, we've been told there will be more transparency about the process, but not until then. And so everything is sort of just conjecture at this point, but the answer is new sophisticated modeling. And the use of elevation certificates, I think, will probably be very helpful to rectify any sort of error in mapping, because they can't get this right for every single property in an NFIP participating community, because it's not just in the flood zones, because they're kind of sort of not eliminating the flood zones, but Kinda. So for rating purposes, at least. I don't know, Ashley, did they call you and ask you for your elevation data? That would have been nice.
No, I have not heard anything, but no, thank you. That's helpful. I was just wondering about that because, I can see using the LiDAR to get at land elevation, but I'm just curious how that would get to finished floor of a structure. I feel like you would have to have at least some information about foundation type, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see what details they release.
Yeah, I agree. Kathy, you asked a really good question in the chat. And I meant to mention this in the overview. Yeah, it's unclear, again, how the new rates will speak to the regulatory side of the NFIP three-legged stool or whatever they teach you at the L273 course. I don't know, although what we have heard is that there will be modifications, not extreme, but some to the regulatory side of things. And there's a push led by ASFPM and NRDC to request for a formal update of the minimum standards to better reflect current realities and just to update those minimum standards because they were done so long ago. And I don't know if they're really, I don't know when those updates will occur, but we've heard that the minimum standards will likely be modified to reflect the new program. Does that mean that all of the important flood zone determination work regarding building codes and local floodplain management standards will go out the window? I don't think so. I think that it'll just be, I think we'll have to wait and see. But from the CRS standpoint, like all the higher standards that communities are earning credits for regulating outside the high risk flood zone are probably going to become even more important in the future. So all of everybody's work in the shaded X and the X zone, if you're regulating in those zones, I would be advocating that the CRS program will credit those activities even more in the future. Holly, you mentioned that local drainage will now be factored. I don't know how that works. And I put a question mark next to that section. That was in a webinar that I attended, in the fall. And when they said it, I asked a follow-up question and they were not taking questions. And so no one answered. I have no idea how that's going to be a factor. I don't know if that's information that a locality would then be sending back to FEMA when they receive all of their, the flood maps and the regulatory tools. I don't know, to be determined. The other thing that I forgot to mention is that as the CRS program becomes updated to reflect this new program, they're going to be looking to various different groups and people that are active in the CRS program for advice and for feedback on what communities are thinking and feeling about the CRS and Risk Rating 2.0. And Wetlands Watch is on their list of people to work with and ask questions about. And so I'm glad for that opportunity. And y'all can expect that we'll use the CRS Workgroup as a sounding board for a lot of those questions and discussions. And so the good news is that there's a good chance that our voices will be heard, and to what degree that information is used for change, I'm not sure, but we'll definitely have the ear of the people making the big decisions, which is good. So I'll be updating everybody on that as more information comes out. All right, I'm going to end the poll. Anything else? Any other questions? Everybody psyched about Risk Rating 2.0? Yeah, okay. So only 23% of localities have said residents are making noise about this. So there's, I guess, time to frame the program and the issues before everything kind of gets into motion, which I guess is good news. But it's going to be confusing. Okay. All right, what was before risk rating 2.0? All right, future work group meetings. Okay, so again, Wetlands Watch has received a grant from the Coastal Zone Management Program to do a couple more of its not all day, but about 5-hour CRS training and evaluation programs. Trying to do this in the COVID world is just a little bit of a challenge. It might not be one full day, it might be a couple days, or it could be something where, you know, we just wait and do in person if some communities are comfortable with that, because it's just me coming to your community and doing a big overview of the CRS program and the NFIP even a little bit, and then a look at what's happening in your community and what you could be earning credit for. So I did this poll at our last meeting, and I'm going to do it again just because I want to be sure that we're reaching as many different people as possible. And then we'll be setting up some, some communication to look at actual dates. So we have resources to do this in this year, and then there will be resources to do it next year too. So hopefully it will be helpful.
Do you want us to answer no if we've already done this?
Oh yeah. Yeah, answer no. You've
Okay.
already done it.
I don't want to like look like you don't have support, but we've already done it, so we don't need it again.
Well, if you answer no, and I've already been to y'all's community, my feelings will not be hurt because I'll know we've already been there. Okay, I'm going to leave the poll up. All right, so let's talk about the draft letter. So I wanted to send this out prior to yesterday afternoon, and I just couldn't get it done. So apologies for sending it last minute. But of course, there'll be plenty of time before it's, finalized. So wanted to kind of just talk about this. I'm going to share my screen. So we're looking at, how do I find this? Okay, hold on, Safari, here we go. Wondering what people think about the draft letter, want to have discussion about it. I sent it to the people that provided significant feedback and comments yesterday, asking them what they thought about it and if the modifications captured their concerns. And so just an open discussion would be great. The way that it's kind of signed off here is with my name as chair. And so one community said, well, we're not comfortable signing this letter. Can you remove our name from it? And I hadn't thought to include all of the local governments here. And that's something we should probably just talk about, because I hadn't thought to do that. There have been times when we were smaller in the past where we did do that for some different things that we were kind of participating in terms of regulation or change or something. But I was just going to do it from the chair, but I don't want to do that if people are uncomfortable. So I think it'd be good to just kind of talk about this. I tried to make the changes, and Madison is the one who drafted this letter, so I'm not trying to take credit for everything, but the edits that were made, we tried to make them less like politicized, because Wetlands Watch, we have our own opinion about the CVPA stuff, and I don't want that to be reflected in this letter. But there are serious concerns about, the language and how it could impact CRS communities receiving credit or potentially receiving credit for the RPA. So I want to be sure we're not losing that fact, but doing it in a way that's respectful of every community's interests, which is a challenge. So I'm going to shut up and then let's see what y'all think about it.
So this is Whitney. I'll jump in first. No need to protect anonymity here. Virginia Beach is the one that has issues with the letter right now. And I was thinking back to, as you said, previous letters where we included all the members on it. And I know we've asked to be taken off before on other letters too. So our issue, and other people please chime in, provide input. I fully get, especially for James City County and ACMAC, who are getting substantial numbers of open space points for their CBPA buffers, where allowing fill in the buffer would be problematic for them to maintain their open space. I guess my question, and maybe this is just ignorance on my part, because Virginia Beach is never going to get open space points for the CBPA buffer. It's just never, ever going to happen. So my understanding is, and I'm not the CBPA person either, that we have the ordinance, we have the state guidelines, the state everything, and then the locality adopts their own ordinance that has to basically comply with the state guidelines. But at the same time, I guess my understanding is that we have leeway within that, because for instance, in Virginia Beach, you can go to the board for approval for development in the 50-foot or 100-foot buffer. However, in the communities that are getting open space, clearly their ordinance and their program doesn't allow that. So I guess I'm having a hard time understanding how changing at the state level to allow fill in the buffer would impact those communities if they don't change their local ordinance to allow development in their buffers. I guess that's my first big question.
Yeah, good question, Whitney. So right now, the communities that are earning CRS credit in Virginia for the RPAs, which includes more than just James City County and Accomack. It's Ashland, Stafford, and I think some more. Gloucester is definitely going to be earning it. So the good question. So right now, the state language is what was approved or what was reviewed by the CRS task force. Local governments, for the most part, adopt that state language almost verbatim. Not always, but most typically. The communities that are receiving credit still allow for the exemptions, the exceptions to be made for development in the buffer. This is a by right situation. So people obviously have the right to develop on their land. Otherwise it would be a takings when the plats were pre-1990, when the act was enacted. Communities are receiving credit because those variances are granted with low levels of frequency. And when they are granted, the staff are working with the property owner to do the most mitigation as humanly possible to get that development outside of the certainly 50 feet, and then it's outside of the RPA where possible. So they're getting credit for those, for the regulation itself and for the lands that are protected and don't have the encroachments. And so the way that the CRS task force reviewed it was you remove those encroachments, the properties where there is encroachment, from the open space area. And that's either done one by one, parcel by parcel, or through an impact adjustment. So that's kind of where we are. That's why, that's how the localities get the credit for it. The reason why the language could be problematic in the draft regulations is that there is a direct reference to the use of fill in that area. And the direct reference is linked to language about increasing elevation of the land itself. So fill is development and necessary for different shoreline restoration and shoreline erosion protection practices that are hardened as well. I mean, that should be allowed and should continue because it's necessary. That's not, that isn't contested and is already permissible. But this inclusion of, the word fill and then this reference to land elevation is what will be, what will create a kind of a red light situation for the CRS task force. And communities could adopt stricter, like you've said, stricter local ordinances that, that could even reference the importance of keeping, development out. But because of the way that it works and that the localities are pretty much using the state language with some exceptions, it's just adding a lot of burden on the localities to navigate this new permitted activity, these adaptive and resilient strategies, and then adding on top of it this kind of, we need to be careful of this fill language. It's just a lot for communities.
So I guess my next question would be, how is adding this language any different than the development that's allowed in the buffer to begin with? Because it would still have to be approved by the local board. And I would assume if you are doing this still, you would do the same thing of just removing the parcels from your open space.
That's a good question.
And I don't necessarily see why a community would be allowing blanket fill in their CBPA buffer that's not tied to other development of some sort either. And
yeah,
I mean, it may happen, but I don't see why a community would approve fill that's not tied to a development project.
So in the proposed regulations, the fill is in reference to these adaptive strategies, and we don't know what those are, but basically strategies to help like loss of land from erosion and help increase resilience, which could mean a lot of different things. And the reason why the legislation, kind of the origin of it, all arose from this issue in a lot of rural communities of very high flood risk, of property owners bringing in dump trucks of dirt in the night and filling along the water's edge to bring more elevation to their property and to protect against loss of structure. So because of the origin of this, this language, it's unclear what the practices along the shoreline would actually be. And because the language says you can use fill, but just not only fill. So with no check on the quantity. So is it going to be the case that a property owner could use a dump truck full of fill, right? And then add a few plants and kind of call that adaptation? There's no check in these regulations against that happening because there's no requirement for a water quality impact assessment, because these practices or the development is exempt from those things in the draft regulations. So we have no clue what will be considered an adaptive or resilient strategy.
And that's the problem with this whole CBPA changes to begin with.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, so I guess getting to the more productive comments here from our side and where our stance is, being a larger community and the fact that we have a robust local program with lots of review and lots of oversight. One of our biggest concerns as these CBPA draft regulations move forward is having every little tiny thing defined, broken down, and regulated at the state level, taking that leeway away from the local governments to figure out what works for the site and what works for the community.
Mhm.
So I think that's where our biggest concern comes from with how the letter is worded right now.
Mm.
Is the fear is that it's going to encourage more details and more regulation at the state level that then trickles down, takes away from what the local governments can do when we're the ones that know our sites, our soils, what needs to be done to preserve the buffers and how that works in our community. I think is the gist of our struggle right now. And with that, I'll let other people talk.
Okay. No, that's helpful, Whitney. So, okay. So how can we make it so it's less of a state burden and there's more local leeway?
Mary Carson,
Yeah.
this is Ben from HRPDC. In reviewing so your letter, so thank you for sending that out. And then also just taking I had, you had shared the justification for the CBPA credit with me from ISO.
Mhm.
My understanding or my interpretation was that the bigger issue was section B, that it explicitly allows land development in the RPA if it's for adaptation. And
Right.
then the fill is another issue. It's a related issue, but the bigger issue is that the default goes from no development unless you get an exception. So
Yeah.
under limited circumstances, which would have to go through an explicit approval process, to I wouldn't say open season, but almost open season, where the default would be that that development is presumed okay under the new regulations, and that for CRS purposes, the crux of this is that you only get credit if it's open space, and they were interpreting the CBPA as putting the default as open space preservation as opposed to allowing land development. And so if I were, and we've had these conversations with James City County, with others, about how do we navigate that particular conflict or that potential conflict. That would be my source of concern with, if you're getting a lot of points, that this kind of blanket approval or allowance of land development now, I think in the mind of ISO, they'll look at that and they'll say, well, this isn't open space anymore. There's no protection for open space. That may vary from community to community, depending on how you write your ordinance. But the way that we've tried to word this in our regional comment letter, which we're going to be briefing our regional environmental committee on tomorrow, is that, well, two things. One is that we think that the overall structure of how they've put in place this new process is overly complicated, and we think that they should try to integrate it into the existing system of permitted modifications or exceptions and exemptions. That structure, that would be better overall, but also that they should, as part of the overall goal, which is to kind of have them take a step back, is to have this kind of conversation, because it's not clear that they actually talk to anybody about conflicts with floodplain management and how that might have an impact on other, local or regional or state priorities. And having those explicit conversations, bringing ISO in and saying, hey, does this language make sense? Does it not make sense? That would be a critical part of that kind of reassessment. And that's why it's one of the things that we're pushing for, is to take a step back and to explicitly acknowledge that these potential conflicts exist. And we need to know better what the implications of those conflicts are before we adopt a final policy.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Ben. We were just focusing on the fill because it was most directly related to development, which is most directly related to the conflicts, especially with NFIP compliance generally. But I think that your point about, open season, which certainly, is what's really scary about this, and that loophole that's created by, the language related to this section being in lieu of any of the other sections, is a really good point. And I wonder if, Whitney, would that approach be more palatable to the city of Virginia Beach, do you think?
I think so, because, just as I said, I'm not the CVPA person, so I'm just like relaying comments here.
Yeah.
But I do know, based on what Ben was saying in the PDC letter, I know our staff has spent a lot of time providing comments and trying to work with the PDC on their letter, to make sure it matches the thoughts we have for our program and how the state and local programs work, interact, how they're overseen and things like that.
Okay. Well, Ben, can I get with you and talk about, borrowing some language, referencing it in our letter? I mean, I'm going to take his silence as a yes. Deirdre makes a good point. Depending on the size of the fill project, the community may not have a review opportunity, right? And that's part of the, kind of, I'm calling it the donut hole that the regulations establish in the CVPA oversight period. Okay. Any other comments about the letter? What about comments about the way that it's signed off? Not including localities, but just including the Coastal Virginia CRS Workgroup as a name. Are communities comfortable with that if we can get the letter so people are in agreement?
I mean, I think if everyone agrees with the letter, it's okay, but my concern is the fact that Coastal Virginia CRS Workgroup is understood to be a collective representation of communities in coastal Virginia.
Oh, yeah.
So by sending a letter from the work group, it implies some level of sign off by the localities that participate.
Right. Yeah. And it would not be sent off without making sure everybody's opinions are heard. Like we had some comments from some of the rural communities that are less active in our work group, but still a part of it and invited to participate. And so, we would want to make sure that those comments are addressed.
Mary Carson, I had to step off for a few minutes, so forgive me if this has already been discussed. Is VFMA sending a letter?
We, don't have the bandwidth at this point.
No.
Because I would
No.
just, as a suggestion, I think, Whitney's comments about I think the structure of the work group is purposely fluid, right?
Right.
So, it makes it, I think, hard from a structural standpoint to actually say that the work group is doing anything from an official standpoint. We don't have a voting roster that would actually officially sign off on something. So just from a practical perspective, it makes it a challenge.
Yeah.
Obviously this group has a lot to offer. I think, from a practical perspective, I almost wonder if it might make more sense just if the board for VFMA wanted to take your letter and send that, that would seem to me to then that would be, it's one thing, VFMA is a association of individuals who voluntarily join that group and participate, and they elect board members. That would be completely normal and above board for the board to send a letter. And it would be clearly separate from, that the localities that the members work for, that the board is not speaking on behalf of the localities. I think it's a little bit more confusing in the context of the work group.
What do you think about that, Kristen?
I mean, I'm fine with that. I don't care. I mean, I support this letter, so I'm fine with VFMA sending it. We have, when is it due? Because we have a board meeting next Friday. So we could talk about it then if it's not due before then. But if it is due before then, we could just email it around and ask.
Yeah, it's not due till May 3rd.
Okay.
Yeah, we have time.
Yeah. So, I mean, we could talk about it on our board meeting next Friday.
Okay.
And that
Well-
approach makes a lot of sense to me too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it would still be helpful to know, like, in general, if you all support this from the CRS work group. Like, I recognize that each, I don't know that we could put like Henrico County's name on it specifically, because I would have to get like permission on that, like for this letter, just like the rest of you. But if there are no like glaring issues from this, at least those of you that are BFMA members, that would be helpful to know. Just so that when we talk to the board about it, we can give them like the backstory of kind of how this came to be.
Well, as a VFMA member, you know my glaring issues.
Yeah. And I know we've got like half the board on here now, I
know, I
guess.
was just
So we
thinking
can
that.
just like.
Well, so how about I make the modifications? We send it back around, and then we talk with the VFMA board about it. And if you are on the call and you're a CRS workgroup community member and you want to share a comment with me about how you feel about the letter, email me, or you can direct chat me in this Zoom chat. And we'll just make sure it's right and what people want. And if we go with VFMA, that's fine too.
MC, I've been informed that you asked me to share our letter, and that I did not hear your request, so I apologize for that.
No, that's okay.
I can bring it up on the screen right now if people would want to see it, or
Yeah.
we can send it to you, after the meeting, and you guys can take a stab at it and look at it.
And I have a copy too. I was just thinking what I had said was, Ben, I'll get with you and maybe we can borrow some of the language and, and cite you, right? Like this is, coming from HRPDC just to show continuity or whatever.
Sure, yeah. So our process for that, so I mentioned, regional environment. So actually we're going to be talking to the planning directors about that in about half an hour. We're briefing the Regional Environmental Committee, who will actually be voting on that letter tomorrow at their meeting. And then the commission, the plan is to have them vote on it on their meeting on the 15th of April. Okay. So once that happens, assuming that actually happens, that will be the official, comments from the HRPDC. And at that point, you can copy it, cite it. Yeah, you can copy and take and steal whatever you want from it right now. It's out there. It's not proprietary. It's just not officially voted on by us yet. So it's not our language officially, but it is language that you are free to use if you'd like. Okay,
cool. I know that's really helpful. And that letter is great. Okay. All right. Well, we'll just keep everybody posted on this, and thank you for your feedback. And again, email me or chat me if you want to say something specifically and individually. Okay. Has anybody submitted for 320 map information service recently? York County is looking to use the Excel spreadsheet, real estate professional contact lists that you might have created for that outreach. Anybody?
Kent, you might want to check with Falls Church. I think they were working on this like before I left DCR. I talked to, oh my gosh, now I can't even think of his name. I'm so sorry. I'm glad he's not on here so he doesn't witness me forgetting his name. But I talked to their CRS person in Falls Church, and I think they were working on this as part of their annual recertification. So they might have a spreadsheet that you could look at. I'll find his name.
Okay, thanks. I'll check, see if I can get a name. I'll check and see if I can get some information.
And I think, anyone in our region would be good too, because the contacts might be more regionally specific, as opposed to, Fairfax might be just a little bit of a distance. Well, Kent's looking for it, so contact Kent if you know anything. Oh, okay. Matt said in the chat that they submitted for 320, but not sure about that element. So maybe Tristan and Kent can connect. Okay, so I am going to turn it over to Ashley, and Ashley's gonna just give a little, we're gonna do a poll for Flood Fluent, and Ashley, if you wanted to provide any info, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Mary Carson, and we appreciate you putting this poll together. This will be really helpful input for us. So yeah, we are working on some new content for Get Flood Fluent, which is the Hampton Roads Regional Flood Insurance Outreach Initiative. We briefed our Coastal Resiliency Committee on this last week, and the questions that we have for you today are just related to, how you're using those materials, if you're using both printed materials, the RAC card that's available, or the Get Flood Fluent website, and then also if you're earning credit specifically for those materials, if you're a CRS community. So we're looking at adding some new content related to, protecting your property, protecting your people from the hazard as well. So using some language like turn around, don't drown. So that should cover additional topic areas for CRS outreach. So we're looking at potentially revising the RAC card as well. That information will be on the website, but we're also looking at potentially adding that to the RAC card. So we wanted to gauge, how many people are using the RAC cards and if there's kind of interest in revising that as well for credit. And then lastly, we have a question specifically related to an outreach effort that HRSD has helped us with. So in 2019 and 2020, HRSD printed copies of the RAC card. I'm not sure the exact number, but it's like 350,000. It's a lot. That was distributed through the region through paper mailing when they sent out the bills. And this year, we had reached out to them again about doing that. And there was a little bit of question about whether, that's the most efficient outreach method. And if, we were going to provide the printed RAC cards again this year, we would be responsible for the cost. So we just wanted to see how many localities are currently earning credit for that specific outreach technique. I believe it's worth 12 points because the RAC card covers 2 topic messages and then is a direct mailing. Mary Carson had done the math for us for that previously. And then also in addition to that printed RAC card, there is a bill message that goes, that has the option to go in there as well. I believe 6 localities took advantage of that previously, and you can just add a couple sentences in the bill message text with information about contacting your local floodplain manager. So that's another opportunity to earn credit. And I think the bill messages would still be a possibility moving forward. We're just also trying to evaluate, how to proceed with the RAC cards. So your responses to this poll are greatly appreciated. And, if anyone has comments they'd like to share as well, we welcome your input.
Can I chime in on the ISO side?
Yes.
So I think RAC cards and direct mailings are really great, especially if you have the template ready for other communities to be able to utilize. If you want to work with me to make sure that we get the action statements that cover as many of the 6 creditable topics as possible, I'm open for that. We do credit. So if it's a RAC card, it's an informational outreach project. So it's 1 point per topic. And you can have it in up to 5 different buildings in your community. So normally our outreach projects are creditable for repeating the same project up to 5 times a year. But for informational, because they're static information, we credit for up to 5 buildings. So if you get all 6 topics in your RAC card and you have it in 5 buildings, then you can get your 30 points.
Okay, gotcha.
And then if you include that in a mailing, either to the entire community as an enclosure, then that would be a general project. So that would be for each time you mail it out to the whole community, it would be 2 points per topic times those 6. So that was the 12 per. If you include that as an enclosure to a target audience, to either your entire SFHA or your entire rep loss area, those are our 2 most frequently used target audiences, then then those topics are 6 points per topic. So it really jumps up pretty fast, especially if you have those more concentrated target audiences. So I've definitely seen communities decide to do a twice a year rep loss mailing or a quarterly rep loss mailing. And if they make sure to cover all 6 of those topics, the points can jump up pretty fast. Outreach, without a PPI, outreach topics, credit maxes out at 200 points. So almost half a class right there.
Right.
Yeah, and I think, Ashley, I'll have to get back and look at like all the documentation and the back and forth when this was kind of coming out. I think that I did like an exercise similar to what Emily's doing, where we talked about the max credit potential for each thing. And I can look through my slides, or I don't know where I put that thing. I don't know if it was in a presentation or what, but I can try to find that information, and then we could make sure localities have a copy of it so they could know all of the point value and the way to kind of stack it up, because the HRSD mailing, so for number 3, Emily, that is something that goes to everybody. And that's, the real value of it.
Yeah, I mean, the things that we look for, we really want to make sure that they are the action statements for each of those topics, because it's a directive for the reader to start doing something, contacting their insurance agent, calling the planning department if they're going to build to make sure they have the right permits, keeping the natural function areas clean of debris and things like that for natural functions of the turnaround, don't drown is like the big action statement for not driving through waters, to be protecting people. Contact the community to ask about your particular flood risk. Giving them those directives so that they have something that they could follow up on if they wanted. I have more of a background in outreach, so I like to push this side of things, that those messages really have more impact when you hear the message from multiple times, but also from multiple sources. So even if it's the exact same message, if they get it in a mailing, or if they get it on a sign, or if they get it from different venues, then it's more powerful because it becomes repeated.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. And we've marked it up. All of the documents have been marked up, or all of the outreach materials that Ashley's talking about have been marked up with each topic, and were pre-reviewed by ISO. So there's great examples for the communities. I think, we try to do the work for everybody so they could just submit. And so hopefully this, kind of the feedback received from the communities will be helpful to know what else needs to be done to make it easy.
Yeah, I will say, if it's for the repetitive loss audience, the thing that we've seen the most of recently is previous letters based on the 2013 manual did not put a big emphasis on the 3rd rep loss credit criteria of financial assistance information. We used to allow the statement of get a flood insurance policy to count for that. We no longer accept just that minimum. It needs to be some kind of directive to that target audience of repetitive loss readers, that they can contact you guys in the community to have a discussion about potential financial assistance. So even if your community is not actively working on grants, even if you don't have the bandwidth for that, telling them that there are some national grants out there, or that there are avenues for financial assistance, call to discuss more. And even if that discussion ends with the community is not working on those at this time, but we are collecting interest. So once there is big interest, that will help us get that program off the ground kind of a discussion. But so we are checking much more closely for the financial assistance language in the rep loss letter.
Mm-hmm.
It was updated in the manual for the 2017, but it didn't get, a lot of people just keep using their same template. So that's something I've been seeing.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, that information's really helpful. And, you know, I think, like Mary Carson said, we had marked up the RAC card previously to look at what some options might be for additional credit. Right now, it only covers know your flood hazard and insure your property, those two topics. So, you know, we would have to look at how to kind of what can we remove and what could we add to make more space on the RAC card and add some of the additional text. But, you know, if that would be helpful for people to be able to max out or add more credit just by adding more topic areas to the RAC card, you know, I think that's something that we're certainly interested in exploring. And yeah, Emily, that would be great if we could follow up with you to work on some specific language for that as well. And we'll see, you know, what kind of feedback we get in terms of printing the materials, because we have the current RAC card available as a PDF download on the website. So if we were to revise it, we would make that version available on the website as well. But yeah, and so from what, to make sure I understand correctly too, from what I was hearing earlier, if we increased the RAC card topic messages, but maybe didn't pursue the direct mailing, since it has more messages, just by having them available at libraries or other buildings, that would help make up some of the points that could be lost from a direct mailing. Is that correct?
So that one document would get counted as different outreach projects. It will get counted as an informational project based on links that it's available. If it's included in a mailing, it will get counted as a general project, a separate project, because it's being sent out to those people. So yes, if the one that gets sent out doesn't get updated, I understand. I always like to give them the most information as we can in those direct mailings, because it is a big opportunity. But if they're already printed and as enclosures, I completely understand using what you've got before updating to new. But yeah, even if it's just updated for the printed RAC cards in the buildings and it has nothing to do with a mailing, that is still highly useful for the communities.
Okay, thank you.
It's really easy when you get whatever it is that credits those topics, when you've got it formulated, and it can be an enclosure. Like you can have your letter and it can say specific stuff. If you've got a newsletter that goes out to an audience, you have your newsletter, but you tack in this enclosure, then you know that distribution included those creditable topics. So it's just, it makes getting those credits a little bit easier to find on each particular outreach.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah, the new content that we're working on for the website, I think I mentioned this already, but it'll cover the protect people from hazard, protect your property. So we have some of that language that we could look at putting onto the RAC card. And then there would be only 2 other topic areas, I think, that we haven't looked at language for yet for the website.
Yeah, there's some examples in the coordinator manual. There's a table in section 330 that have some actionable statements that are pretty applicable to most communities.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So thank you, Ashley. I'm going to end the poll and then I'll send that information to you. We'll share the results to see. We talked about risk rating 2.0 and we did the poll and we just did this poll. So we'll be good. I think that we might be able to get maybe 2 CECs for this meeting. Okay, so we just have a little bit of time left. Wanted to do report outs for localities. Please provide a report out in the chat, or you can do it by unmuting. I do have one report out that I'm just going to go ahead and read, and then Ken from Pocosin can add as he sees fit. But Dannon O'Connell, the city senior planner and assistant floodplain manager for Poquoson, is ending his position at the city, leaving at the end of April to work in Charlottesville as a planner. He's said that he's interested in having the Charlottesville enter the CRS program and speaking with Roanoke and others in the area about creating a regional work group out there. So congratulations, Dannon. It's awesome that you got that job, and we will help support you in any way that you want. And please stay a part of our group, and we'll help you set something up out there. We'd love to help. Also with Poquoson, Danielle Quick, Environmental Compliance Officer, has moved to the Fayetteville, North Carolina area to help with her parents. And so Erin Mixon from the city has moved into her position as a permit technician and will be working with the city's environmental compliance officer, or it will become the city's environmental compliance officer, and will be working closely in the CRS program with Ken as well. So welcome, Danielle, to the party. Ken, anything else that I missed? Dannon. Goodbye, Dannon. Best of luck.
Thanks.
All right. Who else wants to report?
So while we're talking about staffing changes, this is Whitney and Virginia Beach. Kim Tempesco is no longer with the city of Virginia Beach, and emergency management is in the process of hiring to replace her position. So we're hoping that we'll have someone in her position prior to the next CRS work group meeting.
Great. I know. Sad for Kim.
I feel like I was just thinking Zoom needs a reaction that's like not a laughing crying face, but an actual crying face, because
I know
Danielle's leaving and Kim is leaving. That's really unfortunate.
Kim has already left, and I told her before she left, I'm like, I'm going to just like sit here and cry nonstop.
I know.
But
she's in private sector, so it's really
different.
I tried to hire her in Portsmouth and keep her in the fold.
I know, you were too slow.
I was, you know, I was this close.
I know. Oh, but yes, we're gonna miss her a lot. But we did the interviews on Monday. We have two really, really good candidates.
Good.
Both are gonna need some training and stuff, but they'll be really awesome either one we get.
That's great. Well, big shoes to fill. Anybody else?
I'll just go next. So I don't really have much to report out. We're still slowly working on pulling stuff together to join CRS. FEMA told me that we are still tentatively planning for our CAV to be in June, but they may delay like the floodplain tour piece of it, because I suspect they're still not going to be allowed to travel in June. So we'll see how that goes. Otherwise, my life is about rewriting our floodplain ordinance right now. So whenever we get that finished and I have a draft that I can share with anybody that wants it, I will share. We're trying to, so planning is doing like a complete overhaul of our zoning and subdivision ordinance right now that they've been working on for like 3 years. So I'm trying to kind of just slide into the end of that process and jump in on their public hearings to make our changes. So I think the plan right now is that it will be done to be like adopted in June, but I'll know more in the coming weeks. So
great.
Hey, it's Christy with James City. Daryl did finally retire and leave us, so I'm still in mourning over here. Yeah, Daryl Cook left. He retired. So yeah, no, I'm kind of bummed, but very happy for him. He'll be back part-time at a different role, but not in the SRP role. Anyway, so we'll have someone else joining us in that role shortly. We've also been reviewing all the Lomar stuff for the changes that they're doing to the Limwa line, which doesn't seem to be too big of a deal here in James City. But anyways, please join in our mourning that we lost Daryl to retirement, but happy for him.
Oh my gosh.
That was a crazy announcement, Christy.
I know,
There's no lead into that.
Everybody knew. So, but yeah, no, he's gone to better and things with his grandkids and his family. So I'm happy.
Yeah.
I'm glad he got the class 5 under his belt before he left.
I think that was what he was kind of waiting on. So that was a big accomplishment for him, as well as the rest of us. So anyways.
Wow.
I really thought everybody knew. So I saw Kristen's face and I was like, oh.
No, I didn't hear anything about that. What a sweet swan song for him though.
Yeah.
Wow. Sad, but
Yeah.
so happy for him.
EMC, this is Matt Simons, City of Norfolk. I saw that Tristan had just put in the chat about our, we just finished up our CRS verification. And so we are planning on receiving notice of a class 5 designation. But one thing I wanted to just let the group know about, we did receive notice last week that we did get our natural floodplain functions plan approved. Originally during our first shot at it, sending it over to the the specialist, they gave us 15 points. And then we sort of had a back and forth conversation. It took a lot of explaining, I think a little bit more than it probably should have, for us to explain that as an urban community, you know, we do have large portions of the special flood hazard area that are not in a critical floodplain habitat that you would find on like the Nature Conservancy website or anything like that. You know, I mean, of course we have salt marshes and we have dunes and we do have, you know, some critical floodplain habitats, but we also have just, you know, very urban neighborhoods, parking lots, you know, large portions of the city that are not mapped in one of those areas. But eventually we were able to explain that we, you know, we still do have threatened and endangered species throughout the entire SFHA, not just the critical areas. And I think that what eventually got us the points is we showed a picture of the peregrine falcon, which is endangered for our area, and it was on the in a high-rise apartment building balcony, landing on the balcony. And so I had to, you know, basically send off an email saying, look, you know, here's our endangered species in the SFHA. It's not in a critical floodplain habitat, but we have actions clearly spelled out in our green infrastructure plan to support that species. And so from there, they did agree, and they said, okay, you do have actions that do promote the protection of these species, not just in the critical floodplain habitats, but throughout. So we did get the full 100 points. I think that we're the only community in Virginia that I was able to find that's getting this. And I would just say that it once we kind of figured it out, it's surprisingly repeatable. You know, the formula, it can be very easily copy and pasted to any community really. And so I'm happy to share our plan with the group. You know, I think I've emailed it to you before, Mary Carson, but whoever wants to a copy, you can email me. But we're happy to share it. We do think that it's very easy to replicate in any community. We just had to kind of get through those hurdles with the technical reviewer.
Thanks, Matt. I'll post, I just made a note in the chat, so I didn't forget. I'll post the plan on the website under the meeting materials. It's great. Really cool. Anything else?
So I just, since somebody else has spoken up, yeah, I just put in the chat, I forgot to mention to you, I'm working on making a substantial damage plan, which is one of the new activities in the addendum. And I got a copy of a plan from a community in Louisiana who has already gone through the FEMA review and the ISO review and is working on like final revisions and everything, but they're think they're in class 5 or 6 right now, but they're in the process of doing their visit for class 4. So anyway, I'm using that as the template. And when that's finished, I'm kind of cleaning it up and addressing some of the like issues that I found from it and some of the feedback they got from ISO. So when that's finished, I can share with everybody. Our emergency manager kind of gave me their intern because he did vaccinations right now. So I'm using him to do all of this work. So I'll share that with you. It should be done at least like mostly finished in the next month or so, because I think he finishes his school semester like the first week of May. And then I saw that Tom posted in the chat that he was working on his CCMP, and she shared a copy of hers for that too. So I can share that with everybody or send it to Mary Carson to share if you want to see what she already got approved for hers, because she like already went through and updated it for the new changes.
Yep, share with me and I'll post it.
We do have a template for the CCMP. I can share that with you, Mary Carson. You can share that as well. So great for finished examples, but we also have a template. So I'll share that as well.
Okay, awesome. Anything else? Okay, well, thanks for staying a few minutes extra, everybody. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your week and a nice Easter.